All right, everybody. So this video is in reference to the balance packet. So if you don't have that packet out in front of you, make sure you grab that. And this series of stories or highlight is going to take you through all the information you need about balance. So balance in art is a principle of art concerned with equalizing visual forces or elements in a work of art. Balance needs to be seen rather than weighed. We're not talking about physical weight. We're talking about elements and principles of art. Those elements of art become the visual forces or weights in an art object. Most artworks have a central axis, a dividing line, usually imaginary, that works like the point of balance. Many artworks have a central axis with equal visual weights on both sides. Those lines can either be vertical, like the one that exists in between these two birds, or it can be horizontal, like this one down here. There are four major types of balance we're going to look at, and the first one is formal. Formal balance is when equal or very similar elements are placed on opposite sides of a central axis. So if we were to draw a horizontal line through the center of this painting, it's very similar from left to right. Formal balance is easy to identify. You just need to find the central axis. So although this image is very similar from left to right, there are a few things that make it different. Over here on the left, forgot this was a touchscreen. Over here on the left, we have a woman with a baby on her back. And then over here on the right, we have the girl with the braids. They're similar in size and shape and color, but those differences make this formal balance. So close to the same, but not. Symmetry is a special type of formal balance in which the two halves of a balanced composition are identical or mirror images of each other. Symmetry appeals to us because of the bilateral symmetry of the human body. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, 2 eyes, 2 ears. So if we were to divide this image in half, it would be a perfect mirror image from left to right. Same thing up here with the butterfly. Perfect mirror image from the left side to the right side. That's symmetry, exactly the same from left to right. Up next, we have informal balance. Informal balance is also referred to as asymmetry, and it involves a balance of unlike objects. It does not consist of 2 or nearly 2 equal halves or sides, as you can see from the example. It relies on the artistic arrangements of elements to appear balanced. So if we look at our example, we have a large shed over here on the left-hand side and a small car hanging out in the woods. And then over here on the right, we have 2 smaller sheds and this large tree helping to balance out the left side of the composition to the right side of the composition. We're going to look at some more examples in a moment to make sure that we understand this, because informal balance is the hardest one to create. Last but not least, we have radial balance. Woo! Radial balance is when the forces or elements of the design come out or radiate from a central point. The axis is the center point. Radial designs usually form a circular pattern like a mandala. Radial balance occurs a lot in nature, like a sunflower or the inside of an orange. So those are the 4 different types of balance: formal, symmetrical, radial, and informal. So we're going to look at some more examples, but specifically we're going to look at informal as well. This is an example of informal balance. If we take a look at this painting very closely, everything on the bottom is the same color, the same shape, the same line moving backwards in space. There's no variety here. But if we look at the top of the painting, it is filled with variety. The tree, the house, the other smaller, different colored trees, the mountains, the sky, the clouds. All of that gives you a nice balance. No variety, lots of variety. No variety, lots of variety, which is why it's balanced. This next example is symmetrical. It is a perfect mirror image from left to right. This is our imaginary dividing line. If we were to fold this image in half, all of those shapes would line up perfectly. This is a great example of formal balance. This painting by Frida Kahlo is very close to symmetrical, but there's some details that make it not perfectly symmetrical. The letter in her hand, the flowers tucked under her arm, and the fact that her face is pointed this way. She's looking at us, but her chin is pointed away. So it's close to symmetrical, but those details make it formal instead. This is another example of an informal painting. The imaginary line is right here. These two larger ballerinas are balanced out by the four smaller in the background. So you can see that informal balance is helped out by shapes or objects and the number of objects versus the size of the objects. This is an example of radial balance. This is another example of symmetrical balance. One more last great example of informal balance, because I think this is the most challenging one. The Great Wave off Kanagawa by Hokusai is an informal composition. This large wave takes up a lot of the composition on the left. On the right, it's balanced out by the mountain, the people in the boats, and this cloud in the background that mimics the shape of the wave. So everything from the left to right is balanced by visual objects. So now that we know about balance, we're going to talk a little bit about parts of an artwork. This is the third page in the packet that you have in front of you. So there are three parts to an artwork. Number one is the subject, or the image that can easily be identified. So with our example, we would probably say that it's the guy right here who's screaming with his hands on his face. Number two is our content. Content is the message the work communicates: pride, love, family togetherness, or loneliness. With the scream, if you look at it, you might think that the content or message is fear. This is a guess. Edvard Munch is not in the room for us to ask this question, so we just have to take a guess sometimes based on what we see as to what the message could be from the artist. Last but not least, we have composition. The composition is the way the principles of art are used to organize the elements of art. So that's going to come in handy when we're answering the questions on the bottom part of the page. So in the bottom part of the page, use that Van Gogh painting. Let me go ahead to it. To talk about what you see, what you think the message might be about from the artist. Why did Van Gogh paint this painting? What was he trying to tell us? And then you're going to talk about the composition. And when we talk about the composition, you should use the following words: